Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a webcast brought to you by the Daily Journal and djournal.com, coming to you every Monday afternoon around 2 o'clock, talking about what's going on with the state legislature and anything else related to that. I'm your host, Brad Locke, joined as always by Bobby Harrison, our Capitol Bureau Chief. We're back after a little time off. Bobby, you have a nice little visit down there to New Orleans last week?
I did. We listened to some music, ate some good food, and even went to the zoo.
Well, that's good to hear, Bobby. And of course, you got a Fourth of July is coming up tomorrow. I guess some people are off today, Bobby. It's kind of a weird place for it to fall. We're still working. Of course, we're a newspaper. We're always working, to be honest.
Most state employees are off. I'm in the Capitol right now, and it's well, there's been a lot of tourists in here today, but other than that, it's just me for the most part.
Well, I'll work a little bit tomorrow, but otherwise I'll try not to strain myself too much on the 4th. We do have a few things to talk about. I mean, it's the middle of summer. Not a lot going on, but there's still some things to talk about, Bobby, including, since we have the new fiscal year started, and that means also that new laws go into effect. July 1st is when new laws passed in the past session take effect. Most of them do anyway. Some took effect immediately. Some will take effect later on, but let's talk about a few of those, Bobby. One of the big ones is the buckle up law, the seatbelt law. Now, if no matter where you are in the car, back seat even, you have to buckle up, which, that's actually got a little bit of blowback I've seen on social media from people, Bobby. And it's an interesting topic to discuss because you're talking about, a full grown adult might say, if I don't want to buckle up, it's not hurting anybody but me. Which,
There
could be an argument for that. If you get in a wreck, you could hurt somebody if you go flying through the windshield. But I kind of get where they're coming from. But on the other hand, if you don't buckle up, I think you're kind of dumb.
Yeah. The back in the in the 90s, Brad, Mississippi had a law that was it was the buckle up law was not a primary law, which meant that if the police officer saw that you weren't buckled up, he couldn't pull you over for that reason. There had to be another reason to pull you over. But it was a huge deal in the 90s when they finally went to a primary law where the police officer was driving down the street and he saw somebody not buckled up, he could pull them over and give them a ticket solely for that.
Yep.
And that was a huge debate at the time. It was Mothers Against Drunk Driving were involved. All sorts of groups were involved. Finally getting that law passed in the 90s. But during the 2017 session, Representative Steve Massengale from up in Benton County just went to the floor and offered an amendment and passed it with hardly any debate. It passed, his amendment passed the House and it passed the Senate. And lo and behold, before anybody hardly realized it was the law of the state. And so, for better or worse, Steve Massengale deserves a lot of credit for that law.
Yeah, they call it Harley's Law, named after a teenager who died in a wreck last year in Marshall County, a girl from Potts Camp. That law is.
She was one of Massengale's constituents, so that's why he said that was the reason he did what he did.
I think it's only like a $25 fine if you get caught without the seatbelt, but still, it's a good law. I try not to interject my opinion on many things here, Bobby, but that seems like one of those common sense laws, I suppose. There are a lot more that I found interesting. You may just want to touch on the ones that you find interesting, Bobby. Of course, these have been passed, so this isn't like news that they're now law, but still, it's just good to touch on them again. Of course, you got the Leisure and Recreation District law for would allow the Lee County Board of Supervisors to establish one of those, as we've seen with Tupelo. Has been on that train for a little bit now, Bobby. And then you've got taxing the earnings of be able to tax the earnings of fantasy sports companies at 8% and be able to regulate their activities. This one I really like, Bobby. Maybe because I'm an English minor. Now they have to teach cursive in the elementary public schools.
Yeah. I would venture guess most public schools are doing that, but I guess some are not. And I guess you can make the argument that in today's modern society where most people do, the letters are written in email form and not in letters in the mailbox, that maybe cursive writing is not as important as it used to be. I mean, sometimes I wish when I look at my cursive writing, I could go back to jail to school to learn how to read what I write.
Well, I'll be honest, I don't write cursive anymore unless I'm like signing my name, which I hate that. But I mean, I learned, and I assumed it was just something that was required because when I was in the Clinton Public School District back in the 80s, in second grade, we learned what they called italics, which was just kind of the precursor to cursive. And then, best I can recall, we started learning cursive like the next year. After that, and so I wrote cursive all through my schooling, but at some point after I reached adulthood, I went back to just writing normal print or whatever.
Print, yeah.
And now
I kind of do a combination.
Yeah, whenever I go back to try to writing cursive for anything beyond signing my name, it's not pretty.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of, I don't know, annoying because I've gotten out of the habit. Any other laws that kind of are notable to you, Bobby?
Well, I mean, there were several that I mean, it wasn't a real busy year in the legislature. You could argue,
Sure.
Perhaps the most impactful law, which was requiring prohibiting politicians from converting campaign funds to their personal use. That law doesn't take effect to January 1st
Right.
of 2018, I guess, to give the politicians time to convert their campaign funds to personal use. I don't know. But there was, when we hear a lot about the, opioid crisis, and not only Mississippi, but throughout the nation. And Mississippi, like most other states, now have a law on the book starting this weekend that, a doctor or pharmacist could write a prescription for this, what is called an opioid antagonist, to just like a family member. So if you had a son or daughter or husband or brother or whatever who you knew was addicted to opioids, then at some point, I guess data shows there's a good chance that person's going to suffer an overdose. And this drug, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Yeah. It actually reverses the effects of the overdose and gives the time to get the person to the doctor, to the hospital, to probably save his or her life. And it's apparently simple to use. You can use it through an injection or through nasal spray, and it's you can use it like the EpiPen for certain food allergies or whatever. So sure. and other things. So that's an important drug that could save people's lives. I mean, an important law that could save people's lives, but for the most part, there wasn't a lot of big laws that passed in 2017.
That's true. Well, something big that could be coming down the pike here next year, Bobby. Let's jump into that. The lottery, the state lottery has been discussed quite a bit. They formed a committee or a task force, whatever you want to call it, 9-member panel to kind of look into the benefits and maybe the drawbacks of having a lottery. And a couple of local legislators are on that committee. You've got Nick Bain from Corinth and Mac Huddleston from Pontotoc. They went to Little Rock a couple of weeks ago. Of course, Arkansas has a lottery. So they're on their fact-finding mission right now, Bobby. And one of the things they found is that the overhead for running a state lottery is pretty high, isn't it?
Yeah, that's Nick Bain and Mac Huddleston both were talking about that. And some members of the task force you referred to was, of course, created by House Speaker Philip Gunn, and it's sort of the House study committee. But presumably, based on the work of that committee, something could come out of the House that would go to the Senate to approve a lottery, theoretically. But some members of the committee went to Louisiana that also has a lottery. Others went to Arkansas. And there was a key difference in Louisiana. There's what they referred to. I wrote these stories.
It's called a mandate.
Mandate too much. Thank you, Brad. And Louisiana has a mandate that a certain percentage, there's a certain percentage that has to go towards the winnings, and it can't go into the overhead to run the lottery. Arkansas has no similar mandate, and in Arkansas it was really incredible. You probably got the numbers there in front of you, Brad, but it was 85 million. They had they netted about 85 million for the state, but the overhead was pretty incredible.
Yeah, in Louisiana it was 177.9 million, and then for Tennessee 394 million. I guess Tennessee, that was more populous state there.
Yeah, of course, Arkansas is about the size of Mississippi. So a lot of people are thinking that what Mississippi would make on the lottery is similar to what Arkansas makes, which is around 85 million per year, I think.
And the folks in Arkansas said they can't really say for sure if it's really helped with economic development. But on the other hand, on the plus side, it does not seem to have increased dependence on entitlement programs like public, I guess, welfare and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is a big fear that I'm sure some people have.
Right. That's a lot of people feel that the lottery will just sort of, from a societal standpoint, really hurt poor people and lead to more dependence on social programs like welfare, Medicaid, or whatnot.
So this committee, they again finding out some information. They're going to meet again in a few weeks. Bobby, kind of, I guess I'm assuming just discuss what they've learned so far.
Yeah, I would assume they would meet this month because they have, they got to make a report for the 2018 legislative session. So I would assume they're going to meet 2 or 3 or 4 more times before the new year begins. So they got to stay pretty busy.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep track of that story for sure. And before we close things out, I want to touch on this recent ruling regarding the so-called religious freedom law in Mississippi that was supposed to go into effect last July 1st. It got struck down by Carlton Reeves, the judge from the Southern District of Mississippi. But the U.S. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals recently reinstated that law, Bobby, the known as House Bill 1523. So what does that mean right now for that law?
Well, the Fifth Circuit, it's important to note the Fifth Circuit did not rule on the merits of the law. What they said is that it was too early to find the law unconstitutional because no one had been harmed by the law. Carlton Reeves had struck down the law before it ever took effect in Mississippi. Just a few hours before it took effect, he struck it down last June 2016. And the Fifth Circuit reinstated the law, but as I said, they didn't rule on the merits of the law and didn't really even express their opinion on the merits of the law. So whether this law is constitutional or not is still up for debate. And the law, the opponents of the law say it is the most restricted law in the nation in terms of prohibiting the rights of gays and homosexuals and other members of that community. So we'll just have to see. The main thing the law allows businesses not to serve provide services for same-sex marriages, and it provide and of course it also says that ministers don't have to perform same-sex ceremonies. Of course, ministers didn't have to do that already. So in some sense, the law is just kind of doesn't have any impact, but in other areas it could have a significant impact. One impact was, for instance, it says clerks don't have to issue a marriage license to gay couples if they have a religious objection. Now, under the law, it says the state would step in and issue that license, but the question then is whether the gay couple is having to go through more hoops, if you will, than say a straight couple. So, so there's still, this law still has a long way to go in the process. I think the law there will be other lawsuits filed against this law. So we just have to see what happens in the future.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the court ruled that the law, until it actually harms someone, that it's fine. Which we'd have to get a lawyer in here to really maybe give us some insight onto that, Bobby. What would constitute harming someone and how would you prove it? And so I guess it could get a little bit tricky. But as what's the guy's name? Rob Hill of the Human Rights Campaign. He's the state director for them in Mississippi. He says this fight is far from over, and like you said, Bobby, I'm sure we'll see some more action in the courts.
Yeah, I think you can make the case. Say if a gay couple went into a courthouse in any Mississippi county, and the clerk said, I don't believe in gay marriage. I'm not going to issue the marriage license. And there's no one else in the office who issued a marriage license, and they had to go through the state to get the marriage license. I think that would be grounds, at least, for another lawsuit. And the Supreme Court has already Rue one time, Brad, when, the clerk in Kentucky refused to issue marriage license. They said that, she couldn't do that. So, that, I think that's where the law may really get into legal jeopardy.
All right. Good stuff as always, Bobby. Thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of Capitol View. Again, coming to you every Monday around 2 p.m., unless one of us is on vacation, as Bobby was last week. But otherwise, we'll be here every Monday. If you missed it live, catch the replay later in the day here at djournal.com. Give Bobby a follow on Twitter at BobbyHarris9. I'm on there as well at Brad Locke. And that'll do it for this episode. We'll see you next week. Until then, happy 4th of July.